Hi everyone, thanks for having me. It's pretty fun to come here as an opportunity to share our experience building a company at the intersection of design and engineering. I'm not going to afford to be in G's here, but I did want to kind of walk you guys through a little bit of my personal experience and how that came about to creating a company that creates clothing for men and women that is built on technology, but is really meant to be something that seamlessly fits into your day and allows you to be more comfortable. So a little bit about my background. I grew up nearby. I'm from Amherst, Massachusetts. I was a Boy Scout growing up, and this is how I spent pretty much, every other weekend. We were going backpacking, biking, canoeing, all around Massachusetts and New England. And it was through this that I really got a passion for the outdoors and performance materials. And so whether it was, seeing the extreme temperatures in New England, this is climbing up Mount Monadnock in the day after New Year's, and it was freezing cold at the top. And this was something that kind of inspired an experience of how do I start to make better performance clothing. I love spending my weekends going to EMS, REI, browsing through the racks, flipping through those tags of Gore-Tex, Color-Tech, and I really got into those materials. And so during a snow day in high school, some of my friends and I, we started hacking our own apparel. So we started making everything from rain jackets to sleeping bags built on our own materials. So we went dumpster diving, went and got Tyvek home wrap. It's that material they wrap homes with. And it's a great material because it's waterproof and breathable. It's a way more effective or cheaper alternative to Gore-Tex. But it required us to create some innovative ways of manufacturing. So we took my friend's ping pong table, rolled out this Tyvek, and then we took a spray adhesive, laminated ripstop to it, cut and sewed a jacket out of it. But I should say that the creative process is iterative, and there was a design before that. And the first version was actually a jacket that we were trying to make a windproof fleece, but we used trash bags instead. Quickly realized on a mountain climb that trash bags are not breathable, so that's what inspired the need for Gore-Tex. This is actually a sleeping bag I created that was really trying to solve an issue, which is that when you sleep in a sleeping bag, you compress all the insulation and you don't actually prevent what's called radiative heat transfer. There's kind of different ways that heat travels, but most sleeping bags focus on conductive heat transfer. And so what I was thinking was, how do I allow that kind of energy that our body's emitting to reflect back at us? So I took a bunch of space blankets, ran them through my parents' paper shredder, and stuffed my sleeping bag with that. And that's what was created, and then basically tested it on a climb. And this is something where it really taught me this experience of, or a process of testing, designing, and iterating, and actually testing in the real world. So I think with any kind of person who's been making, there's these stories. I think we all have them. And our parents probably all have these stories of things we've broken in their house. For me, I broke that paper shredder. So these are some other things. I ran cross country and track, made my own running spikes. I was really trying to develop an ultralight running spike, and so this was one that was designed around this kind of idea of origami. How could you create this ultralight running shoe? This was before Flywire, but it was basically a piece of fabric that was folded around my foot and used the architectural seams to provide support. And so, again, kind of going back to these experience of wanting better performance and wanting clothing to actually perform better to allow me to run a better time, climb a higher peak, etc. And that took me to MIT. So I went to undergrad at MIT and studied chemical and biological engineering, did the kind of non-obvious switch into the fashion industry, But it's something where, it's a place where it really values mind and hand. That's the motto of the school. And through that process, learned a lot about materials technology, and one of my favorite classes in this was called How to Make Almost Anything. And it taught a variety of different manufacturing techniques, whether that was laser cutting, whether it was CNC routing. And all of this really inspired this process of rapid prototyping, but also rapid manufacturing, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's my background. Here's some products that I made. This is the trash bag fleece jacket. And now, fast forward about 6 or 7 years after that, started this company with some classmates from MIT called Ministry Supply. We make performance clothes for the workday, and we're really trying to imbue the performance you expect out of outdoor athletic clothing, but into clothing you can wear every day, particularly to work. Kind of walk through our history. My co-founders and I, we met. We actually all were kind of tackling the same challenge. My co-founders were professionals, consultants flying to the client side. My co-founder Ramon was basically taking Nike Dry Fit socks, cutting them, and sewing them to his gold toe socks to create moisture-wicking dress socks. So, and that was really our shared passion, which was my co-founders. We were all apparel hackers, and that's was a common blood between us. We launched on Kickstarter actually 5 years ago with a dress shirt that was born out of spacesuits and uses a special material that we'll talk about. But we ended up setting the highest record for a fashion project at the time on Kickstarter. And since then, our brand has grown. We now have 8 stores across the country, and a couple of years ago, we actually set the Guinness World Record for fastest half marathon run in a suit. So it was the kind of ultimate test of our product going into that. So that's Ministry Supply. But I wanted to use this opportunity to really talk about the design process and how design and engineering can really intersect, particularly in an industry which is constantly trying to balance form and function. We're at a time right now where millennials have kind of a different lifestyle. It's about work-life integration more so than it is about work-life balance. We often look at our brands as an expression of our own identity, but in a different way than just a logo on our chest. But also that performance has permeated every part of our wardrobe. At this point, what we used to call dry fit dress shirts is now kind of a regular running shirt. It's a part of our common lifestyle. So we're at this point right now where people are expecting more of their clothing, right? We've grown up with Nike Dry Fit, we've grown up with Under Armour, and we start to expect that same performance, not just in the hour that we're at the gym or the weekend, but actually every hour of the day. So, but when we look at our clothing, it's not too dissimilar from this, right? We're still wearing cotton dress shirts, wool suits, and you still have to go to the dry cleaner. Your clothes are still wrinkled at the end of the day, and you still get pit stains. Don Draper used to keep a little drawer with a bunch of extra shirts so that you could change into them after lunch. This is the story that we hear many people having, and despite all the change that's happened in our cell phones, etc., none of this has gone over to clothing. So this is where there's been a ton of technical advances in apparel, and I wanted to talk about that. But one of the things was kind of taking a step back and looking at how do people approach technology right now in clothing. And a lot of times we talk about wearable technology. And for the most part, it's been about the quantified self. It's about taking data and using our clothing as a platform to extract heart rate, our breath rate, etc. But it doesn't really focus on making our clothing better. It doesn't necessarily make our clothing better at keeping us warm or keeping us dry. And that's what we're really trying to focus on. So in some ways, when we talk about fashion and technology intersecting, we've kind of missed the point. And that's what we're trying to focus on, is kind of looking at this new approach. How can these behavioral shifts that we just talked about, this lifestyle change of work-life integration, plus this awareness of performance materials, as well as the technical advances in moisture-wicking fabrics, etc., they should really bring about a new type of clothing. So one of the quick things is everyone's seen their mobile devices, but before then there was Apple Newton, right? It was virtually the same thing as our iPhone, but it was before its time. It didn't have enough speed. There's no internet connectivity, and even though it was a good concept, the technology wasn't there, and also the need for the connected self wasn't quite there as a society. fast forward, the same thing happened in apparel. Actually, a lot of these synthetic fibers existed 20, 30 years ago, but there was rayon, there was nylon or polyester leisure suits. And oftentimes when people think about synthetics in business clothing, this is what they think about. But the clothing has come so far, and the technology and the yarns has evolved so much in the past couple of years that this isn't what we're looking at right now. In the late 90s, there's this emergence of performance athletic clothing, Tri-Fit, really leading the charge there. Through the mid-2000s, this started to permeate, beyond just what we wore on the golf course or on the track to kind of every day. And then the activewear athleisure market really took off in the past 5 years. And so at this point, we're all expecting that performance. And so this is a technology that's kind of come about its time. So I want to talk about a couple of technologies that we've kind of learned about. One is body mapping. So this is a technique of understanding how our body expels heat, moisture, pressure, and we can use all of this to actually inspire the way we design our clothing. Oftentimes clothing starts off with a sketch, and it doesn't really start off with an understanding of the human body. What does our body need? And we actually want to use both of these things to inspire the design of our products. The other thing is there's been incredible advances in fabrics. So one of the exciting ones is phase change materials. This is one that we happen to use in our dress shirts. It's a material that NASA uses in spacesuits to keep astronauts comfortable. In space, in the sunlight, it's 240 degrees. In the shadows, it's negative 140 degrees. And astronauts are going through these huge temperature swings. And by using this material, it acts kind of like a thermal battery. So it absorbs heat when you're too hot, stores it in the shirt, and then releases it back to you when you're cool. So this is a smart material in many ways, and it was designed for spacesuits, but we figured out a way to actually apply it in dress shirts. And the third, evolution has been in the manufacturing side. There's been, a lot of work in digital manufacturing. 3D printing is one of them. There's an analog to that in clothing, which is 3D knitting, and it's basically 3D printing for clothing. And this is something that we think is really unlocking the way in which we create clothing, because it allows us to really unlock different ways of creating porosity, material density, etc. But technology alone doesn't create a great product. There really has to be a new approach to how we design our products. And when we think about this balance of form and function, the traditional design industry, fashion industry, has really taken it from a approach of what's the inspiration, what's a mood board, what are the current colorways, what are people wearing on the market right now. But then it goes to this very linear design process. It goes design, sampling, production, and goes straight to market. And what happens is we have this phenomenon of runway to rack, right? And this emergence of fast fashion, which is just pushing product. And it's creating new product, but not necessarily better product. And the reason why that's happening is there's no feedback. There's no closed loop. And as engineers, we are familiar with this process, and any kind of industrial design process is familiar with this, right? You research, you ideate, you build and prototype, and then you test it and repeat it. And you go through this iterative design process. And we're trying to bring that to the way we design clothing every day. So we use a couple different techniques. I spent some time at IDEO and was really exposed to the human-centered design process there. And it really helped us think through how do we incorporate the customer in the design process, whether that's through wine and dines, whether that's through field testing. And through all this, we've built this kind of system we call Quantified Empathy, where we will log every piece of customer feedback, and we can categorize it to see what are the major trends, and use that to actually improve our product over time. So this is a really critical part of closing the loop on the design cycle, so that we're actually able to make sure that our product gets better with time, not just that we're creating a new product. So one of the examples of this is a blazer. So in our discussions with people, they were talking about blazers as this piece that it's kind of like a power suit. It's this thing that you put on. It's this, it makes you feel more confident, but at the same time, it restricts you. When you're taking a flight and you're sitting down, the first thing you want to do is take it off, right? And it's something that restricts our motion and sometimes prevents us from really moving through our day with ease. And so we said, how can we create a product that doesn't stop you from moving? So the first thing was we created this one product called the Aviator 2. It was using this really novel fabric that looked like a woven fabric but stretched like a knit. This is the one that we ran the half marathon in. We also created this product called the 3D suit, which was actually sculpted in 3D and used a special material that we could thermoform. And we really looked at how can we unlock stretch and 3D structure at the same time. And all of this culminated in kind of a deeper understanding of, our clothing has fundamentally been designed as 2D fabrics projected onto a 3D surface. And inherently, there's going to be seams, there's going to be points of strain and compression, and the only way to solve that is to kind of rethink the design process and manufacturing process. So I wanted to show you kind of what we believe is the frontier of apparel. That's our seamless jacket, and it's actually printed as one piece. It takes about 93 minutes. You literally take yarns and it gets printed out. And we think it's a really novel manufacturing process, and it's unlocking the ability to create a garment in 3 dimensions. It unlocks body mapping. We're actually able to look at where our body generates heat, where our body, our skin stretches, and we can actually create articulation zones to align with that, for example. We're actually able to experiment with new yarns because we can actually change where different yarns appear in the garment, so we can have moisture-wicking yarns in the underarm and then stretch yarns in different parts of the garment. So it unlocks this ability to really look at the human body and reflect that into a garment. And also, we can look at ventilation, for example, where we've created targeted ventilation in the underarms, and it mimics the underlying human structure. So the result is this garment that just moves with your body. And the exciting thing is, we started this off as a small batch. We did 50 units of this product, and it sold out in about 24 hours. And it was this testament to people are looking for something new. And so we actually brought this machine to our store on Newbury Street. And so if you go to Newbury Street, our store there, we actually have a machine, and it's actually printing garments on demand. You can actually go in, design the garment, you can change the color, button colors, etc., and a garment will be printed in about 90 minutes. And so not only do we think this is the future of the design of garments, looking at a digital prototyping process, digital manufacturing process, but also a customer experience where people can come into the store and be part of the design of their own garments. So that's one of the things I wanted to share with you. It's kind of the culmination of a lot of experiences, but that's Ministry of Supply, and I'm more than welcome to take any questions.
Everybody give Gihan a round of applause. So we have about 5 to 8 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. If you're too shy, Gihan can chat with you for a minute or two before he has to run off to work after. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and Gihan will call on you.
Yes.
So I'm curious about kind of your supply chain as a means and a tool for advocacy for the people who make the things, and also like environmental advocacy. There's so much that goes into garment production, and I know that I try to, as much as I can, buy less, but buy from companies that are working with producers and stuff like that to give them really great living incomes and stuff like that. Have you guys sort of played with and thought about how your supply chain is sort of emboldening?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. I mean, the apparel industry is traditionally one that, because it's simple labor, it's easy to move into emerging markets. But for the same reason, there's a lot of questions about how do we actually allow it to be a tool for people to learn better skills and kind of go up the value chain, right? In terms of, if you look at the market, it's constantly followed, the cheapest labor market, and at some point, we're seeing production move from China to Vietnam to Bangladesh to now Ethiopia. And so what's beyond that, right? And so we've really looked at 3D knitting and other types of rapid manufacturing as kind of the evolution of apparel manufacturing. It unlocks a couple things. One, from a sustainability standpoint, it's an additive manufacturing process. So what that means is we only use the material that goes directly into the garment. Traditionally, garments are cut and sewn, so you'll lay out a bolt of fabric, and you waste actually about 30% of that. When you arrange the patterns, you try to optimize it, but generally about 30% of that fabric gets wasted. The garment's more durable because there's no seams for that regard. But one of the things that we're excited about is that it allows us to engage people in the creative part of the design process. So while the machine may be doing more of the manual procedures, we do need technical creators and programmers to drive the design process. It also allows us to not just made in USA, but also made in your city, which is something that we're excited about. We have 8 stores across the country. We have one facility right now where we're actually producing garments on demand out of Newbury Street. But we actually see kind of the vision of our product line being something where you can actually go to any of our stores and have some of these garments made on demand for you. Yes, in the back.
Do you design a women's line? And is there any difference in the process by which professional clothes are designed for men and women?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We actually just launched a women's line about 9 months ago, so it's a new expansion point for us. One of the things that we thought, though, we were going through this design process and thinking through how do we make sure that we're creating a human-centered design process, not just male-centric or female-centric, but really trying to figure out what are those timeless truths. And one of the things that we found was that while there may be slight stylistic changes, but for the most part, our bodies generally need the same things in terms of moisture management, heat management, and that has really affected our design process in the sense that a garment like 3D printing allows, or a process like 3D printing allows us to create a garment that fits a variety of different body types, but also tune it for the individual. So largely, we haven't actually found that there's a difference between the design process, that there's actually more in common than there is in difference. The main difference from a marketing standpoint is that we have a longer product life cycle for men's products. Dress shirts don't change that frequently, whereas the styles in like our women's products tend to be about 40% shorter. Yes.
At what point do you think, hey, I can really bring my passion of, packing, fashion into my day job?
Yeah, it was something where in college I was thinking I was creating an outdoor gear company, and the transition was realizing kind of biking across the bridge back and forth to Boston, Cambridge, realizing that dress shirts that I wear just didn't remove away moisture, and there was this opportunity to take a lot of those practical learnings, but to a new industry, and kind of seeing that market opportunity was one of the reasons to say, okay, let's just create a proof of concept dress shirt, and started selling it actually in the slum cafeteria, and really got a pulse for the fact that people actually wanted and demanded this product. So diving into this, I kind of thought it was like 6 months. Like, I'm going to dedicate 6 months to this project. Let's get a proof of concept out, launch a Kickstarter. And it was these small kind of tests and validation of supply and demand of testing the products on the market, getting that feedback that validated in the long term. So I think sometimes it's scary to say like I'm going to spend the next 10 years creating an apparel company. It was actually thinking through how do I think through the next 6 months and building a great product, seeing if there's demand for it, and so there's a choice at the end. You either continue or you don't. But I think by breaking down those bigger challenges into kind of smaller commitments, it's not as kind of overwhelming. Yeah. Yes.
Mine's on the technology part, my question. So the picture that was up there on the screen shows, the jacket and it had buttons and its hand flaps. Is the technology there that the machines can actually put the buttons on and like flaps like that?
So yeah, that's a great question. So the flaps are actually a secondary procedure that are laminated on, and the buttons do have to be put on by machine, but for the most part, the entire garment comes out as one piece. The lapel, though, is a really cool piece. That's one that's actually programmed to fold on itself. So we're using more and more techniques like this. This technology has been used for making flywire, but at a much smaller scale, never like full garments.
Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about creativity, inspiration. And in companies, and I think it's probably interesting for a lot of us here to hear kind of the balance between, as we refer to maker and manager. You sound like a very creative, inspirational guy. But the business needs to be run as well. Can you talk about this a little bit, the balance there?
Yeah. It's, my co-founders, we have a diverse set of backgrounds. And so realizing that, my co-founder was an operations consultant, had, worked on production for the Lockheed, F-35. For me, my background is, making products. And so one of the things we realized is that that's actually a great complement in skills. And one of the things we've realized is that embracing kind of our individuality as a maker or manager has actually helped us support each other. And for makers, I think what oftentimes is a challenge is there's a perception of leadership equals management, whereas leadership can actually be making as well. And that's something as a company we've really tried to foster, is that how do we create an organization where makers can also be leaders in the organization? That means leading product, but also leading teams. And a couple of things that we found that work well for that is making sure that the organization is built to balance both. So, for example, on Wednesdays we have we call no meeting Wednesday. So that if the manager's schedule is 15, 30-minute increments to get a micro task done, the Wednesdays of no meetings is big blocks of time so you can get a big project done. And by balancing those two things, we find that both types of working styles actually flourish in this environment. But that kind of realization that there are kind of two different ways of working, and being able to switch between modes has been really critical in the sense that when you acknowledge that, you can actually allow both types to flourish.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so everybody please give me one more round of applause.